I was lowering myself into a chair at my father's family dinner when he yanked it away. I don't sit with a poor, useless kid. A cousin laughed. My aunt stared at her plate. My sister Tessa lifted her phone and started recording. I didn't argue. I stood straight, looked Dad in the eye, and said, "You just made a very expensive mistake." He actually smiled. "What are you going to do?" "Send me a bill." I took my coat and walked out. He had no idea that one of his company's most important systems was tied to a contract expiring in 6 weeks, and he knew even less about the price I had quietly kept from reaching his desk. My name is Maya Whitaker. I'm 35, and according to my father, I've spent most of my adult life doing success wrong. Dad understood success when it had a gate, a warehouse, or a German badge on the hood. He understood my sister Tessa. She was 32. Vice President of Marketing and Partnerships at Whitaker Hospitality Supply, the distribution company Dad had built over 3 decades. She drove a new luxury SUV, wore expensive clothes, and worked in the office with his last name on the building. Dad loved introducing her. My daughter Tessa runs partnerships for us. Then there was me. I owned a townhouse outside Cincinnati, drove a 7-year-old SUV, and ran a software company most of my relatives could not explain. To Dad, that meant I was struggling. The truth was less dramatic. My company had 16 employees, more than 40 business customers, and had been profitable for several years. I paid myself well. But I reinvested heavily because I wanted the business to grow without pretending every good quarter made me rich. Dad never understood that. He once looked at my car and asked, "If the company's doing so well, why are you still driving that thing?" I said, "Because it starts." He thought I was joking. The strange part was that Dad really had helped me once, 3 years earlier. Whitaker Hospitality Supply became one of my first major customers. He reminded people constantly. I gave Maya her first real account. I never corrected the heart of it. His company had taken a chance on mine when we were still small, and that mattered. What Dad never mentioned was that his operations team chose our software because it worked, or that, since then, we had added dozens of customers that had nothing to do with him. In Dad's mind, I was still the daughter whose little company survived because he allowed it to. That was why. When someone at dinner asked how business was going and I casually said we had 43 customers, his expression changed, not proud, annoyed, because the number did not fit the version of me he preferred, and there was one other number he knew even less about. The amount his own company had been paying mine every month, 3 years earlier. Whitaker Hospitality Supply had a warehouse problem. Trucks were arriving without clean schedules. Receiving teams were juggling spreadsheets, emails, and phone calls. Inventory exceptions were getting buried until somebody discovered them too late. My company had built software for exactly that kind of mess. We handled dock scheduling, vendor appointments, freight delay tracking, inventory alerts, and warehouse workflows that connected to a customer's existing ERP. Dad did not choose us because I was his daughter. His COO, Marcus Reed, ran the pilot. Marcus was 51, had spent most of his career in distribution, and had no interest in making me feel good. The pilot worked. So Whitaker Hospitality Supply signed a real commercial agreement with us. 36 months, 2 warehouses, support, ERP integration, a fixed monthly price. Everything documented. Dad loved telling people he had given me the account. What he never seemed to understand was that after the contract was signed, I gave him something too. Our normal pricing increased as the platform matured and our customer base grew. His did not. Whitaker kept paying $250 a month. We also waived implementation fees that would later become standard for accounts that size. At first, I considered it gratitude. His company had trusted mine when we were young. But by the 3rd year, my finance lead had started bringing the account up during pricing reviews. "Maya, this customer is dramatically below everyone comparable." I knew. I always gave the same answer. They were early. What I did not say was that early had slowly become shorthand for my father. Their contract was scheduled to end March 31st. It did not automatically renew at the old price. For service to continue beyond that date, both companies had to sign a new order form. Several weeks before the family dinner, my team prepared the renewal. Commercially. Whitaker should have moved to our standard pricing. I hesitated. Instead, I asked finance to model one more 24-month legacy rate higher than what Dad was paying, but still far below what a comparable customer would receive. Nobody had offered it to him. Nothing had been promised. It was simply an exception waiting for my approval. And that Sunday night, when Dad pulled my chair away and called me poor and useless in front of the family, he had no idea that the favor he thought he was doing me had been running in the opposite direction for years. Dad's birthday dinner had 14 people around the table by the time I arrived. Tessa was already holding court. She was talking about a hotel group Whitaker Hospitality Supply had just landed and how she had personally shaped the partnership strategy. Dad beamed. That's what building something looks like. I ignored the comparison. A cousin asked me, "How's your software company doing?" "Good. We added several accounts this year." Dad cut in before I could say anything else. She wouldn't have a company if I hadn't given her the first customer. I kept my tone even. "You were one of our first large customers. We have 43 now." The table went quiet for half a second. Dad's smile disappeared. 43 little software subscriptions doesn't make you a businesswoman." Tessa laughed into her whine. Dad glanced toward the driveway. "You still driving that old SUV, yes. And living in that townhouse, yes." He shook his head like I had just proven his point. "At 35. I already owned commercial property. Congratulations." That answer bothered him more than an argument would have. Mom tried to redirect things. "Can we eat before everything gets cold?" People started taking seats. There was one open chair beside Mom. I walked toward it, just as I reached for the back. Dad put his hand on the chair and shoved it several feet away. I stopped. He did not even look directly at me. I don't sit with a poor, useless kid. Someone at the far end gave an uncomfortable laugh. My aunt stared down at her plate. Two cousins suddenly became fascinated with their silverware. Tessa smiled, pulled out her phone, and pointed the camera toward me. I could see exactly what she expected. A scene, maybe tears, maybe shouting, something she could replay later and say, "Look how dramatic Maya gets." I felt heat climb into my face, but I refused to give them that. I straightened my jacket. Then I looked directly at Dad. "You just made a very expensive mistake." Tessa laughed louder. Dad finally turned toward me. "What are you going to do? Send me a software bill?" A few people chuckled. I picked up my purse. No, that answer confused him. I walked to the entryway and took my coat. Mom followed me halfway. "Maya, don't leave over one stupid comment." I looked at her. He moved my chair. "He's been drinking." He knew where the chair was. I left. In my car. I sat for almost a minute without starting the engine. Then I opened the renewal approval waiting on my phone. There were two options: standard commercial pricing and the special legacy rate I had been considering for Dad. I selected the second one. Then I changed its status to declined. I didn't cancel his contract. I didn't raise a single current invoice. I simply stopped asking my company to give his company something no other customer received. Monday morning, our account team sent Whitaker Hospitality Supply its renewal proposal. Dad called me 11 minutes later. "There's a mistake in this renewal." No. A pause. "We pay $32.50 a month. Until March 31st. His voice sharpened. "This says $8,900. That's correct. You nearly tripled our bill because your feelings got hurt at dinner." "No." I stopped approving an exception. $8,900 is our standard rate for an account your size." He went silent long enough that I knew he was doing the math. 2 warehouses. Expanded users. ERP integration. Support for 3 years. None of that had changed what Dad paid. He had assumed the low number was what our product cost. It wasn't. It was what I had allowed his company to pay. "Family helps family," he finally said. I did. "For 3 years. You're seriously going to punish 70 employees because you didn't like something I said." "I'm not punishing anyone. Your current agreement is still being honored exactly as written. And after March, your company is getting company pricing now. The discount was personal." He let out a short laugh. "So this is revenge. If the price is unreasonable, don't sign it." That stopped him. because there was no threat in what I said, no penalty, no deadline I had invented, no system being shut off early. He was free to leave. Fine, Dad said. We'll replace you. That's your right. You think I can't find another warehouse platform? I'm sure you can. His tone changed then, less angry, more offended that I wasn't afraid. You're willing to lose your biggest customer over a family argument, I almost corrected him gently. Then I realized there was no reason to protect his ego anymore. You haven't been my biggest customer in years. Silence. What Whitaker was important when we were starting. I've always acknowledged that. But we have 43 customers now. You told everyone that Sunday. Yes. I thought most of those were small. Some are, some aren't. He sounded genuinely confused. For years. Dad had been telling the family that his account was the reason my company survived. He had never asked whether that was still true. Finally, he said, Marcus will get bids. Good. He should. Dad sounded almost relieved. He thought the market was about to prove I had inflated the price out of anger. He thought competitors would come in cheaper, expose me, and send me back asking him to stay. I knew enough about our industry not to predict exactly what those bids would say. But I knew one thing Dad didn't. For the first time in 3 years, Whitaker Hospitality Supply was about to find out what companies like theirs actually paid for software like mine. Marcus got 3 competing proposals within 10 days. Dad called me only after he had seen all 3. He didn't mention the numbers. Marcus did. The cheapest platform came in a little below ours monthly, but wanted more than $70,000 for implementation. Another wanted nearly $9,600 a month. The third was higher than that. None could move Whitaker over quickly. They estimated 10 to 14 weeks for configuration, ERP integration, data mapping, training, and testing. Our existing contract had less than a month left. Dad apparently told Marcus to find someone who could do it faster. Marcus told him faster was possible. Safe and cheaper was another question. I heard all of this because Marcus contacted our account team about transition options. We gave him exactly what we would give any customer. Their data belonged to them. We would provide exports. We would document the integration points covered by our agreement, and if they needed additional time. I approved up to 90 days of month-to-month service at our standard rate. No shutdown threat. No hostage situation. If Dad wanted to leave, I would help him leave cleanly. That seemed to irritate him more than resistance would have. Then, Marcus did something Dad had never bothered to do. He looked at what our software had actually changed inside the warehouses. Detention charges were down, receiving overtime had dropped, emergency freight had declined, missed appointments were lower. Marcus estimated the operational benefit from the previous year at roughly $280,000, even at $8,900 a month. The system still made financial sense. Then their finance team asked a different question. Why had Whitaker been paying only $39,000 a year? They compared our current commercial rates, the implementation fees we had waived, and the price their account had carried for 3 years. The preferential value was well over $200,000, not money I had handed Dad, revenue my company had simply chosen not to charge him. Marcus apparently said, whatever you want to call it, Graham, we've been substantially below market. That was when Dad stopped calling me. Tessa started. Can't you just keep the old rate? Would you ask another vendor that? That's different. How another vendor isn't family. I let the silence sit. That argument worked better before Sunday. She sighed. Dad says you're trying to embarrass him. I haven't told anyone anything. He thinks you're making this personal. I'm charging his company the same way I charge companies that aren't related to me. Tessa went quiet. Then I asked, do you still have the video? Another pause. Dad wants me to delete it. Why? He says it makes everything look worse. It doesn't make anything look like anything. It recorded what happened. I shouldn't have filmed it. You shouldn't have thought it was funny. She had no answer. By then, Dad had discovered 3 things he hated. My price was competitive. Replacing me would cost real money, and for 3 years. The daughter he called useless had been the one quietly giving his company the better deal. Now he had to decide whether pride was worth paying even more to prove me wrong. Dad's lawyer reviewed the contract before Graham signed anything. That part actually made me glad. I wanted him to hear it from someone he paid to disagree with him. The current agreement ended March 31st. There was no contractual right to keep the old price. The renewal was optional. So was leaving. Marcus recommended staying for 12 months. The product worked. The price was competitive. Switching immediately would cost more and create unnecessary operational risk. Dad signed at $8,900 a month. Not happily. Not because I trapped him, because the numbers made sense. A few days later, he called me directly. I gave you your first break. You did. And this is how you repay me. I appreciated what you did. Dad, appreciation wasn't a lifetime pricing contract. His voice went flat. Put us back at the old rate and we move on. There is no old rate anymore. Because I insulted you. Because the only reason that rate lasted this long was family. He started to speak. I cut in. You can't tell me my work is worthless at dinner and expect it to be subsidized Monday morning. That ended the call quickly. Mom tried next. Don't mix family problems with business. I'm not. The business is getting a business price. Maya, he's still your father. Yes. That's why I gave him more room than I would have given anyone else. I stopped there. No speech. No threat. Just the truth. Tessa called a week later. I shouldn't have recorded that dinner. No. She hesitated. No. You shouldn't have thought it was funny. She went quiet. Then I said, the recording just means nobody gets to pretend it happened differently. She eventually sent me a copy. I never posted it, never sent it to customers, never used it against Dad. I kept it because I was tired of hearing. He didn't mean it like that. After the renewal, I removed myself from the Whitaker account. One of my senior customer success managers took over. Dad no longer called me on weekends for favors. No more informal pricing, no more family exceptions. And I made one change inside my own company, too. From then on, every friends and family discount had a written expiration date because Dad had taught me something useful after all. Gratitude is healthy. Unlimited access is not. A year later, Whitaker Hospitality Supply reviewed other platforms again. Marcus recommended staying with ours, not because Dad was my father, not because anyone felt guilty, because the software worked, the price was competitive, and switching still offered no real advantage. They renewed like any other customer. By then, my company had grown to 21 employees. I still lived in the same townhouse. I still drove the same SUV. Dad never got the dramatic proof he seemed to need that I had become successful. He got something better, an invoice his own company willingly paid. Tessa and I eventually spoke more normally again. Dad and I stayed polite, but distant. That was enough, for years. I thought gratitude meant I had to keep proving I remembered who helped me first. I was wrong. Dad had helped me once. I had helped him for years. Neither gave him the right to humiliate me. He thought being my first customer meant I would always need him. What he never noticed was that gratitude had become a discount he mistook for a right. I didn't make his mistake expensive. I just stopped making it cheap. Would you have done the same? If this story made you think about the difference between gratitude and obligation, tell me what you would have done at that table. Would you have kept the family discount, walked away completely, or done exactly what Maya did? Share your answer below. And subscribe for more family betrayal and clean revenge stories.